killing's gonna stop.
What is it gonna take?
2 teenage girls are dead and 2 families devastated. Now police on Long Island are hunting for a killer. Their deaths have simply rocked the Brentwood community in Suffolk County.
All right, the girls are best friends. One of them would have turned 16 today. Lisa Evers in the neighborhood with what police are saying about the tragedy. Lisa.
Well, Stephen Derry, tonight this community is overcome with grief and fear after the murders of these 2 teenage girls. The killer's still on the loose, and to make the nightmare even worse, police are telling us there's some type of gang connection, but they won't say exactly what it is.
This is a good soul. Right now, she's crying over us. She's washing everybody's sins away.
The mother of 15-year-old Nisa Mickens addressed family and friends at a vigil near where her badly beaten body was found Tuesday night. She was just hours away from her 16th birthday. Her best friend, 16-year-old Kayla Cuevas, was missing. Now Suffolk County Police believe Kayla's body has been found nearby.
It was obviously deceased. We're processing the scene right now. We'll know more as the scene progresses and as an examination is done by the medical examiner.
The 2 girls were last seen at about 6:30 Tuesday evening at Cuevas' house. But when Nisa Mickens' dad went to pick up his daughter, she wasn't there. A couple hours later, a driver found her body in the street. This was the last thing Nisa's parents expected.
We are all out here for the babies.
We're out here for our
This has
kids.
to stop.
The killing's gonna stop.
What is it gonna take?
There's gonna take another
It's
child.
affecting everybody out here. Look at the babies around us.
Look at the
Look
tears
at 'em.
in your eyes.
We're not here for no nonsense. We're here because we lost a loved one today.
My daughter on her birthday.
Now let me show you what's going on right now. Family members, friends, and classmates of the 2 girls have been showing up. Their bodies were found down that street that's closed off to everyone right now. Police are still working this active scene, looking for clues as this investigation continues. And while the Cuevas family learns to deal with the fact that their daughter is no longer coming home, the mother of Nisa Mickens is begging anyone with information to come forward. We're live in Brentwood. I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News.
Saudi Arabia has intensified its air raids on Yemen. The Saudi warplanes carried out airstrikes on Sada, which is Yemen's hardest hit province. A school and a house were destroyed in Sada. Border regions of Razih, Baqim and Safra were also targeted. Observers say Saudi Arabia intensified airstrikes amid the fierce Yemeni resistance against the deadly aggression.
After the end of the fragile truce between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, Riyadh stepped up its brutal airstrikes that in most cases use internationally banned weapons. Sada is a symbol of resistance. It's the hometown of our movement's leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Yet such Saudi attempts have proven counterproductive as reprisal operations deep into the Saudi territory send a strong message that Yemenis will not bow down.
Saudi fighter jets also carried out a new round of air raids on the capital Sana'a. This private factory of water rigs, machines and construction materials have been subject to more than 10 attacks over the last 2 days. Similar airstrikes haven't even excluded the capital's biggest sports stadiums, a move that has drawn angry reactions among Yemenis. They say that supporting retaliatory operations deep inside Saudi territories have become a compulsory national duty.
Saudi aggression does not target a specific group in Yemen, but it wages a destructive and brutal war against all Yemenis with no exception. It has even destroyed sports stadiums and water wells. It's a plot to fan the flames of division.
The Saudi attacks on economic and sports structures are coward acts that reveal the failure in the Yemen war. Such attacks only encourage us to increase our reprisal operations inside Saudi territory to target Saudi military positions. The Saudi attack on the factory of Al Sunidar has deprived hundreds of workers from their livelihood. It's a crime that will not go unpunished.
Over 9,600 people have lost their lives since Saudi Arabia launched its war on Yemen in March 2015. The UN has denounced the indiscriminate attacks on residential areas and economic businesses and promised to form an international fact-finding group to look into such Saudi war crimes, a decision which comes too little, too late. Mohammed Attab, Press TV, Sana'a.
Tropical storm Julia is churning off the southeast coast of the United States. It's expected to gain strength and dump rain on Georgia and the Carolinas. David Begnaud is in Charleston, South Carolina. David?
Scott, right now along Charleston's famed battery, the wind is gusting at about 25 to 30 miles per hour. The National Hurricane Center says Tropical Storm Julia is offshore, moving slowly and erratically. Julia formed last night over land just west of Jacksonville, Florida. It's the first time that's happened in the state of Florida, and it is unusual for a storm to form over land. It was 2 weeks ago that Tropical Storm Hermine dumped nearly a foot of rain in some of the same southeastern U.S. areas that are now feeling the effects of Tropical Storm Julia. Scott, the National Hurricane Center says Julia will remain a tropical storm for the next 2 to 3 days and may even strengthen.
David Begnaud on the Carolina coast. David, thank you.
More breaking news, a deadly shooting at a high school in Texas. It happened in the small town of Alpine. County Sheriff tells ABC News a girl shot another girl in a bathroom and may have taken her own life. One officer was also shot, but police believe it was accidental. Again, the shooter is dead and one girl and one officer were wounded. We will let you know about any new information as soon as we get it.
Orlando now, a major break in the fire at a mosque, once attended by the attacker of the Pulse nightclub. Tonight, police do have a suspect in custody, and this surveillance video showing a bright light, then a man running away and out the gate. But what police revealed late today, and here's ABC's Steve Osensami now.
Florida police tonight say they've caught the guy seen in these security camera videos setting fire to this Sunni mosque in Fort Pierce.
Flames are just going up like crazy.
Authorities say the man who's seen pulling up on a motorcycle and then running from the fire is 32-year-old Joseph Schreiber, a familiar face to police, now charged with arson. It's widely known here that this is the place of worship for the Orlando nightclub gunman and his family. Ever since that painful night when Omar Mateen gunned down 49 people at the Pulse nightclub, worshippers at the mosque have worried even more about security.
Started with hate calls, developed, and now somebody committing arson.
The fire burned them out, and it just happened to be on the 15th anniversary of the September 11th attacks and the start of a Muslim holiday.
This 32-year-old has not yet entered a plea. Investigators say they've taken a good look at his social media accounts and found a number of anti-Islamic posts. David?
Steve Osensami, thanks.
And joining us for more on the story out of Lethbridge is Professor Anthony Hall. He's a professor at Lethbridge University. Hello, Professor Hall, and thanks for joining us here on Press TV's Top 5 once and again. And now, Professor Hall, why is Tel Aviv adding to the problem in Syria rather than the solution, while its closest ally there, Washington, has spent the better part of this year trying to hammer out a peace deal?
Well, al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, which has now rebranded itself as Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, trying to distance understanding that al-Qaeda, of course, was blamed for 9/11. Israel, of course, is using jihadism, using proxy armies fighting under Islamic flags. And it seems this understanding that is developing between Russia and the United States there is an understanding that Assad it seems being to some extent embraced and given a green light to go ahead and defend Syria, the Syrian people and government against the Israeli-backed jihadists. And so this defense of Syria has resulted in Syria knocking down an Israeli, although it's U.S. machinery, an Israeli jet and a drone. Of course, Israel is denying this, but that's often the case. So this is a potential game changer. This is a real pivot taking place where the Syrian government is defending Syria by shooting down an Israeli Defense Force plane. And this suggests a major adjustment that perhaps the United States, in partnership with Russia, are somewhat backing away from this Oded-Yinan plan of destabilizing and breaking up Syria and balkanizing the region. Of course, Assad is in a unique position to hold together the variety of constituencies that compose the Syrian nation, and perhaps sanity is prevailing, and this is a historic occasion where the Syrian Air Force, with a surface-to-air missile, knocks down an Israeli Defense Force plane and drone.
But most of the recent attacks we've had, or we should say that most of the recent Israeli responses have been, there's been fire going astray, most of these cases, coming somewhere from Syria, ending up in open areas in the Golan Heights. No one can ascertain where the firing came or who it came from in the Syrian side. But how has Tel Aviv responded every time? By directly targeting Syrian tanks and or equipment. It's almost like they're trying to provoke the Syrians. Are they trying to forcibly interject into the Syria crisis?
Well, they have been interjected all along. 2,000 al-Nusra Front soldiers have been extended medical care in Israel. It's a matter of record that al-Nusra, which is sometimes referred to as Al-Qaeda in Levant, and now has changed its name, but not its associations, its close associations with Israel. Of course, this Israeli backing of jihadism, proxy armies, fighting under Islamic flags, but doing the work of the Jewish state and the quest for a greater Israel and destabilizing not only the Middle East now, but Europe through this engineered migrant crisis. It's very clear that, this new campaign starting on 9/11, where Al-Qaeda was blamed. Well, now Al-Qaeda is very clearly with Israel, and it seems that other superpowers may be backing away from this Israeli Al-Qaeda alliance, which is very much on public display right now.
And ultimately, Professor, what do you think Tel Aviv is trying to get, or what does it want to see out of the Syrian conflict? I mean, it's provoking the Syrian government. It's supporting at the same time. You just mentioned this, al-Nusra Front. What's its ultimate objective?
Its ultimate objective is to break up and destabilize Syria, which has been a fairly stable country, and the Assad government has provided a kind of leadership that is acceptable and able to lead to compromise between, a very pluralistic, diverse society. The Syrian people are, and there's still a great deal of support for Bashar al-Assad. His trip to Daraya is very much sending a signal that we are taking the land back from the terrorist, Israeli-backed terrorist forces. And it could be that there is a superpower accommodation that is not going to be to Israel's favor, and this IDF mobilization to back al-Nusra is an effort to sort of keep the morale up, as it seems that perhaps the U.S. is backing away from that support of the jihadists trying to overthrow the government of Assad.
Interesting. And thank you, Professor, for your input once again here on Press TV's Top 5. Professor Anthony Hall of Lethbridge University joining us at Lethbridge in Canada.
Joining us now from the British capital, London, is Director of the Sheffield Institute for Middle Eastern Studies, Ms. Catherine Shaktam. Welcome to the program.
Talk to us about the Israeli assaults on Syrian positions in the Golan Heights and in Lenitra, in addition to recent reports which have basically reiterated claims from before that the Israeli regime has in fact been supporting and aiding the militant and terrorist groups in Syria.
Well, as you mentioned, earlier, yes, absolutely. I mean, Israel, we know this for a fact, it's not allegation at this stage, has worked, actively aided, terrorists in Syria because they want to see President Bashar al-Assad gone. I mean, they have even admitted to it when they confirmed that, in fact, yes, they have aided and helped and treated, terror militants because, they felt that it was their moral duty. I just found it very interesting how Israel chooses to have morality when it comes to helping, terrorist organization when it suits their purpose. And the other matter at hand here when it comes to the Golan Heights is that the Golan Heights doesn't actually belong to Israel. It remains under occupation. And I think that the UN in 1981 actually issued a resolution to that effect saying that Israel occupation of the Golan Heights was illegal, in fact. Nothing has been done ever since, and it has been many, many decades. So yes, you could argue that actually what Israel has done is just keep to its policy of war crimes and committing and standing outside international law, because in fact it is actually not only violating Syria's sovereignty, alleging that it was self-attacked, but it was never attacked because technically the Golan Heights belong to Damascus, belong to Syria, and as such Syria just acted in self-defense against terror group which are trying to breach its sovereignty. So again, we're going back to Syria's sovereignty, and I just find very interesting how systematically the right of the Syrian people and Syria as a nation state is being ignored, by the likes of Israel, by the likes of, the US or the UK or any other Western powers, just because this is the narrative in the Middle East right now. To me, again, we are living in such a kind of a dystopian reality where Syria is not allowed to defend itself against terror organization, which the world came together to denounce. So what is it that the Syrian people are supposed to do now? They're supposed to be very careful not to target those territories which Israel wants to claim for itself in the face of international law, regardless of international law, just because they want to. It's insane. Again, we could see how just about when the Syrian Arab army is actually advancing against, the likes of al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, or whatever their name is today, then suddenly we see, jets flying over Syria. Again, I think that timing is very telling as to, whose agenda and what what is the goal here that Israel is trying to achieve. Because we have achieved a ceasefire in Syria, and yet, Israel is trying to look, for an excuse to target Syria, and then again flip it around and blame Syria for what is happening on its territory. Because again, the Golan Heights is under occupation, so technically the Israelis don't have a say in what happens there, but they still do somehow, and the world just accepts it just because it is. I don't think it's good enough at this stage. We need to kind of review the entire narrative of the Middle East and actually kind of look back in history and understand what is going on.
Ms. Shakhdam, the Syrian Foreign Ministry also handed over or condemned the Israeli assaults on the Golan Heights in 2 letters that it handed over to the United Nations chief and the UN Security Council's president. But in similar cases with regards to Israel, such complaints are usually futile.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if anything, the US will sit on it and just, veto or just cry, lèse majesté again, because you cannot criticize Israel. That's just too much for the world to handle. That being said, I think that Syria is playing into, again, it's just abiding by the rule of law and playing into the system because, knowing that nothing's going to happen, but again, it needs to happen for people to maybe wake up and realize that, yes, the system is completely flawed and that you can't work within the system anymore. We need to rethink the entire system and try to see how we could restore, I would say, international order, international law, because, I mean, international law is not even worth the paper it's written on those days, because it's only being waged against, those countries that Western powers feel, can't speak for themselves or don't have enough to defend themselves. This is what, it's being used, I would say, as a tool of repression today. It's not being used as a tool to actually protect countries as it was meant to. It's used, for oppression and repression. We know this. We have known this for a while. Syria more than most, because it has suffered tremendously under international law, at least how Western powers have attempted to interpret international law. But again, because I think that Damascus understand the need to, again, play into the system for the system to actually kind of reveal itself to the public, and for the public to realize that they need, everyone needs to go back to the drawing table and kind of rethink the whole thing, because it's not working for anybody. When you see sovereignty and nation states being challenged just because it suits colonial powers, you know that something is broken.
Director of Shafaqna Institute for Middle Eastern Studies, Ms. Catherine Shackman, joining us from London. Thank you for your comments.
The United States is to give Israel the biggest ever military aid package. Washington has confirmed that it signed a pact under which it will give the Israeli military $38 billion over 10 years. The agreement will go into effect upon the expiration of the current package in 2018. A UK parliamentary committee reports lashed out at former Prime Minister David Cameron for his role in the Libya invasion. The report says the 2011 invasion was based on flawed information. It blames the military intervention for the economic collapse of Libya and the growth of ISIL or Daesh in North Africa. The U.S. and Russia have agreed to extend the cessation of hostilities in Syria for another 48 hours. In a telephone call, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov also agreed that the current ceasefire is holding and that violence has significantly lowered since its implementation on Monday. China has called for a dialogue to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue. Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister Liu Zhenming said that sanctions aren't the solution to Pyongyang's nuclear program. He also says the UN Security Council's response to North Korea's nuclear activities should safeguard peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. A UK-based charities raised alarm over the deplorable situation of displaced children around the globe. War Child has warned in a report that chronic underfunding of aid programs is having a devastating impact on child refugees around the world. It says that vulnerable children are being, quote, systematically denied fundamental rights. Greece says that it cannot comply with labor reforms demanded by the IMF as a condition for a third bailout. Greek Labor Minister George Kotrougalis said his government is considering IMF's demand as a ban on the rights of workers to negotiate their wages and conditions on a collective basis. European Commission President calls on Turkey to fulfill all the conditions required for its citizens to win visa-free travel throughout Europe. Jean-Claude Juncker said that Ankara needs to resolve a number of issues, including redefining its terrorism law to ensure that journalists and academics aren't targeted by the government. The UN rights chief has accused the Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte of undermining justice in his ongoing crackdown on drugs. Zaid al-Hussein said that Duterte lacks understanding of international principles. The Filipino leader is under fire for calling the UN chief a fool and threatening to pull out of the organization.
This is AP News Minute. Donald Trump traveled to Flint, Michigan Wednesday, but the visit wasn't trouble-free. After touring the water treatment plant, where Flint's water supply was tainted by lead, Trump criticized Hillary Clinton during a visit to an African-American church, only to be cut off by the pastor there. Bill Clinton told a rally in Nevada that Hillary Clinton, quote, is feeling great after being diagnosed days ago with pneumonia, and she should return to the campaign trail Thursday. The ACC has followed the NCAA's lead and is removing all of its athletic championships from North Carolina over a state law some say can lead to discrimination against people who are LGBT. The decision affects this year's ACC football championship, which is scheduled for Charlotte this December. Uber riders in Pittsburgh can get a glimpse of the future by summoning a car capable of handling most of the tasks of driving on its own. Starting Wednesday, a fleet of self-driving Ford Fusions will pick up Uber riders who are participating in the test program. Ned Barker, The Associated Press, with AP News Minute.
Well, despite these hacks, the U.S. and Russia are cooperating on Syria. Today, the ceasefire worked out by both gave us a rare look at the remains of Aleppo, Syria's largest city. With no bombs falling for a second day, children ventured into the street. But 275,000 residents are in dire need of food and medicine. Elizabeth Palmer is there.
Here's the sound of a ceasefire working. For the second evening in a row, Aleppo was largely quiet. And monitors confirm they've recorded no deaths anywhere in Syria in the past 48 hours. What a contrast to last week, when Russian and Syrian planes were dropping bombs on rebel-held Aleppo. We drove into the government side of the city today through suburbs shattered by fighting and heard the occasional rumble of artillery in the distance. This ceasefire is not perfect, but it is good enough that we found repair crews already out on the job tackling the huge task of restoring power. And on both sides of this divided city, the playgrounds were full of kids just being kids. The Turkish government sent a couple of aid trucks a short distance into Syria. But there's been nothing like this where it's most needed, in rebel-held Aleppo, where there were demonstrations today. Opposition fighters and some local people making the point that they don't want aid handouts, they want the siege of their neighborhoods lifted. The United Nations does have the first aid convoys all ready to roll, Scott, and there is now a plan in the works supported by the U.S. and Russia to have all the armed parties, including the Syrian army, pull back from the main highway into Aleppo to let the trucks through.
Our Elizabeth Palmer with rare reporting from Aleppo. Thank you.